1970 was the year when it all came together. All those issues. It changed everybody.
And arguably the biggest change taking place that year was in the way women were viewed and treated in the USA. The struggle was even portrayed in TV commercials.
Her job, is it working out?
Great, Mother, just great.
But can she still take care of you?
Just fine, Mom, really.
Forgive me for asking, Harold, but her job, this apartment, so much to take care of.
Well, I was sort of sent to college to find that doctor or the lawyer, and something in me wanted to become the doctor or the lawyer. So it was, you know, it's like I don't want to find that person, I want to be that person.
And here was my mother, a career woman in the 60s and stuff, and yet she too joined my high school counselors in telling me that the best thing to be would be either a nurse or a teacher. My mother said, and I understood where it came from though, she said, get that education degree, which I did. She said, because then you'll be able to work the same hours as your kids. There was no daycare to speak of in that era.
Genevieve McBride and Linda Tuchman were college students in 1970, and they were in the nation's first wave of young women to break through those traditional career and social stereotypes.
It was the first time that women said, well, I don't know if I want to get married, and I don't know if I want to have kids.
I think the changes that were going on in 1970 were really profound. I was part of a consciousness-raising group.
Rena Steinzor had been elected editor-in-chief of the Daily Cardinal in 1970, and although they were united in their opposition to the war, the UW student newspaper staff was not on the same page on every issue.
All the bickering at the Daily Cardinal between the women and the men had to do with women's issues and how they were treating us. Were women given the same opportunities as men? What kind of language did the men use to describe us? When we got out in the working world, would we have equal opportunity?
Pat Sims had just begun her career in a field that was dominated by men.
And you knew when you were in the newsroom and you were one of just a handful of women, that meant something. It was significant.
It also meant breaking new ground at work when it came to her private life as well.
When I had a baby, I was the first maternity leave the State Journal had ever given. And then 12 months later, I had the second maternity leave they had ever given. And so it just was a different atmosphere, a lot of guys. When I was pregnant, they made me miserable. They would go by and rub my stomach for luck, you know, and because they weren't used to having pregnant women around.
Women were also questioning their traditional roles in the home.
Traditional ways that men and women related to each other were changing. For example, in 1970s, the first time I encountered someone who was getting married where she wasn't changing her name. That's a perfect example, which was, you know, kind of an eye-opener.
Technically, it was still against the law for a woman not to take her husband's last name in Wisconsin in 1970. But just because women had their own movement didn't mean they had achieved equality. In fact, they still struggled to be heard on other issues. First and foremost, the anti-war movement. At the UW's Daily Cardinal, Rena Steinzor wrote an editorial in April of 1970 criticizing the male-dominated anti-war leadership.
The anti-war movement was hierarchical. There were some very important women in it, but they were often overlooked.
The first glass ceilings a lot of us hit were in those other movements before we got out and saw them in the workforce. But at a certain point you have to be ready to say, okay, I can pull on the big girl pants now and go on my own.
But women's lib wasn't for every woman.
I never really got involved in, any of that.
Sue Hack was something of a stereotype breaker herself. The 20-year-old from Dane, Wisconsin, signed up to be a soldier in Vietnam.
There was 1,283 enlisted women that served in Vietnam from 67 to 72, only those 5 years.
Hack was stationed at a base in South Vietnam where her job was to identify, tag, and process paperwork for American soldiers who were killed in action.
You were a women's lib pioneer in many ways.
Yeah, I guess you're right, yeah.
But you didn't buy into the movement?
No.
Women are kept out of the jobs long before they even get there, by not being trained, by being counseled out, by being told that that's not their place.